Good afternoon. It is really good, actually. Been sat out in the garden for part of the day. Welcome to Dice and Bolts. Today I'm looking at the Fate system from Evil Hat Productions. Fate is a wonderful game that's been around for really quite some time. There was a game called Fudge, the fully universal diceless game engine or diceless generic engine. And then Fate came along. The first one I had was acronymed out to Fantastic Adventures in Tabletop Entertainment. It got cleaned up quite massively. It was a very indie game, and it was good. I absolutely loved it. I loved the idea. Never actually got to play it. Evil Hat cleaned it up. The SRD is all free, so technically you can get the rules online. There's two kind of versions which you can get, which is Fate Core and Fate Accelerated. The dice and bolts of both of them are pretty much exactly the same. There's a few little tinkerings here and there. I think Fate Accelerated is about £5 for a 50-60 page softback book. It's well worth getting. Fate Core, from what I've seen, the Kickstarter that launched it went ballistic, and there were a lot of books that were put out there. And it's a generic engine, and it is one of the first ones that I've looked at that's used custom dice. So, Fate dice. These are six-sided dice, and there are cards that you can get that mimic these, or you can just use standard D6s or blank ones and pen them up or whatever. But effectively, on each dice, you've got 2 pluses, 2 blanks, and 2 minuses. Fairly straightforward. So you've got a flat probability across each individual dice. And you always roll them in 4s. And the dice and bolts of it is that you would have, there is what's called the skills ladder. Now, this is it goes from like -2 to +8. And you would have a skill, and there's a verbal descriptor for each one of them as well. So +0 is mediocre, +1 is average, +2 is fair, +3 is good, +4 is great. And say, for example, you had +1 average in climbing, and you want to climb up the side of a building to get in, steal the princess, that sort of thing. The GM might say, okay, but you're going to need a good result, so +4. You've got +1 towards it. Now, presuming you've got no other assets that you can leverage against it, you roll the dice. That ain't particularly brilliant because they cancel each other out. That's 1 minus. So effectively, you've rolled a 0 and you needed a 4. You would have had to have got 3 pluses to succeed at that example. Okay, which is quite tricky, which is where you then kind of have assets, and there are aspects that you can kind of bring into it as well. So if you've got good climbing equipment, that might give you +1 to your skill or -1 to the target number. It doesn't matter. Mechanically, it's the same sort of thing. That's the dice and bolts of how the mechanics work. Fairly straightforward. Skill, roll 4 fate dice. That will give you a plus or minus. That increases or decreases the skill, and you do that versus a target number. There's a different set where you are doing competitive rolls, like contested rolls. So when you're rolling against each other, is that you've got your skill and their skill, and then you both roll plus or minus. So if you've got two with like identical skills, say +2, can't do that opposite. You've got 2 at +2. I get 1 plus, you get 2 pluses, you win. Fairly straightforward. It's a very, very simple dice system. There's a lot of deep thought behind the way the mechanics work, but the dice and bolts of it is really, really simple because Fate is a very story-driven game, so it leaves you free to do on that one there. There's the dice and bolts. Roll well. I'll see you around. Let me know if there's anything specific you want me to have a look at in the comments underneath them, and I'll see you soon.